Hi, welcome back to VisualPolitik. I'm Grant. Over the past few decades, technology has transformed our world radically and in every way. Thanks to technological advances, the lifestyle we enjoy today has very little to do with the lifestyle that our parents led, let alone our grandparents. Things like being able to monitor your pulse in real time, generate automatic graphs of your cardiac activity through your smartphone, control every last parameter of your physical activity, always be connected with your friends and family, or the fact that you can have business meetings from your beach apartment by video conference would have sounded like madness until just a few years ago. Now, like everything in this world, it's not all as rosy as it seems. Technological advancement has also brought with it some downsides. And, of course, we can also find double standards as to how states and some multinationals use technology for purposes that are maybe not so good, especially when we talk about technologies that allow the monitoring and tracking of people's activity. But check it out, the start of 2020 has been a good example of the potential of new technologies for dealing with health crises, such as the one with SARS-CoV-2. For example, in many countries, digital applications are currently being used to track and geolocate citizens who may have been in contact with infected persons or places.
By voice or location, Israeli apps can determine your risk of coronavirus, the Times of Israel.
Another good example is that of South Korea, where one of the greatest successes in the prevention of infection and the early detection of SARS-CoV-2 cases has come from the intensive use of technological means, even to controversial limits.
South Korea to impose tracking wristband for defying quarantine orders. Bloomberg.
It is something we talk about in great detail in a video we made about how South Korea has dealt with the coronavirus. The link is in the description. Now, of course, this use of technology doesn't always go so smoothly. As you can imagine, such applications and tracking systems may sometimes have flaws. Listen up.
I wasted 2 days holed up in my bedroom thanks to a buggy health ministry virus app, Times of Israel.
Wasting 2 days in your bedroom may not sound so bad. However, beyond this kind of anecdotal mishap, other, much more important dangers lurk. The biggest problem presented by these new technologies has to do mainly with the new capacity of states to control their people. And yes, okay, you may be watching this from solid democracies, from countries where essential freedoms are guaranteed, and all this is something that today, at least for today, will not concern you. But think how different the situation could be in dictator-led countries, or by governments with few scruples. In such cases, these new technological capabilities can become real weapons of social control. Think, for example, in the case of, you guessed it, China. Using the coronavirus as an excuse, the government has extended and generalized geolocation systems that are highly intrusive in people's private lives. Systems that have gone far beyond simple tracking. They have taken advantage of this crisis to boost social codes that have existed for some years, such as the new health code. These are codes that rate individuals based on certain parameters and determine whether or not those individuals can do certain things. As crazy as that might sound. But what does all this really mean? Where's the danger? Are they temporary measures? Or will they become permanent even once the coronavirus crisis is no longer a threat? What can the Chinese government do with these new identification and geolocation technologies? To learn more about this issue, in this video, we are going to tell you how technology is also changing the way states, governments, are monitoring our lives. In this way, we will try to address the risks that may arise. And no, don't think we're just going to talk to you about China. Believe me, I bet there are things you're going to hear in this video that are going to amaze you. Let's get started.
China, from dictatorship to police state.
Now, I'm sure many of you have heard that China has one of the most advanced social surveillance technologies in the world, especially when we consider their application on a massive scale. Something that has allowed them, during the coronavirus pandemic, to establish systems of surveillance, restriction, and prohibitions like never before. We're talking, for example, about the infamous health code, which uses the colours of a traffic light to classify people according to whether or not they have recovered from the coronavirus, whether they have had any contact with people who had it, or whether they've visited high-risk areas. This system was initially developed by the Hangzhou local government, but has spread throughout the country. It is currently installed on WeChat, the Chinese WhatsApp, and Alipay, Alibaba's payment platform. Well, as WeChat and Weixin, its Chinese version, have 1.160 million users and Alipay about 900 million, we can say that virtually all Chinese citizens have at least one of those two applications that they use every day. Well, many functions have been restricted or conditioned by the health code. But how exactly does this traffic light tagging of citizens work? So let's say there are several ways. On the one hand, if health authorities determine that you have or recently had the coronavirus, or that you have been in contact with an infected person, then you'll be given the red status. Then, if contact is not so obvious, users also have to fill out a questionnaire, which, combined with other data, such as geolocation through mobiles, determines your chances of having been exposed or having been close to the virus. In this way, you could be classified as yellow, or at best as green. The green colour is the one that gives you almost absolute freedom within the current restrictions. And look, don't think for a moment that it's something only used by a few. Not at all. In China, these health codes are being used for almost everything. To allow access to the subway, to go shopping, to go to a restaurant, to a cafe, even to authorise payments for plane or train tickets. In short, life, the freedom of many people, now revolves around the colour they have been assigned. Yes, this may seem like a story taken from Black Mirror, but what we're telling you is what's already working. There's no sci-fi here. Now, surely many of you are thinking, but what's wrong with all this? At the end of the day, it's a really effective tool for fighting the coronavirus. Isn't that what's made China so successful in controlling the spread of the pandemic? Well, let's say the problem is in the indiscriminate use that a government can make of these tools. Indeed, the use of such technologies in China to control or restrict freedoms is not something that has only arisen as a result of the coronavirus crisis. And of course, as we all know, China is not exactly the poster child for human rights and civil liberties. It's more like the opposite. In fact, what seems to be happening is that the coronavirus is being used as the perfect excuse to popularise and perpetuate measures as controversial or sensitive as these. Check it out.
China is installing surveillance cameras outside people's front doors and sometimes inside their homes. After a trip to southern China, the 34-year-old Irish expat and his family were starting their 2-week home quarantine, a mandatory measure enforced by the Beijing government to stop the spread of the novel coronavirus. He said he opened the door as the camera was being installed, without warning. Having a camera outside your door is an incredible erosion of privacy, and I don't know how much of it is actually legal. CNN.
Cameras even on the front door at home? Are you surprised? Well, you shouldn't be. The things that are being put into practice during this health crisis have been in the pipeline for many years. Indeed, China has cities where it is virtually impossible to escape the eyes of the authorities. To give you an idea, nationally, there are about 200 million surveillance cameras, and some cities have literally become a kind of Big Brother set. For example, in the city of, brace yourself because I'm going to butcher this, Chongying, the most monitored city on the planet, 2019 ended with over 2.5 million surveillance cameras for 15.53 million inhabitants. That is one camera for every 5.9 inhabitants. And that's not all. The most troubling thing from the point of view of privacy and freedom are advances in facial recognition techniques for surveillance purposes, a subject in which China is the undisputed leader worldwide. Take, for example, brace yourself, Zhengzhou, an industrial city located in the central part of the country. Here, the authorities have massively combined video surveillance with telecom tracking to create one of the most advanced and accurate facial detection systems in the world. And how does it work? Well, the police have white boxes that are mobile antenna trackers installed next to many of the surveillance cameras. In this way, the images captured by the cameras can match people's faces with their mobile phones and their geopositioning, so that the system can determine whether the person detected by the camera is really the one in that place. Now, the question is, what does the Chinese regime want all this technology for? Well, we can find a clue to what awaits the Chinese in the near future in the coastal city of Rongqing. Once again, I apologise to any Chinese people watching. I'm Scottish, I barely speak English. How it works is that each of the 670,000 inhabitants of the city of Rongqing receives 1,000 citizen points, and depending on how they behave and what they do, they can lose or earn points. For example, you're fighting with your neighbour, 5 points are deducted. Don't do what you have to do when you take the dog out, 10 points gone. Donate blood, earn 5 more points. Of course, you can forget speaking out against the authorities or making any negative comments about the political, economic or social situation of the country, because then things could get very, very complicated for you very fast. Alongside this system, the authorities have set a ranked list of actions and activities in daily life that may or may not be undertaken depending on the number of points you have. For example, if you lose a certain level of points, then your most basic freedoms, such as mobility, begin to be restricted. And watch out, because we're talking about a system that can prevent you from accessing a bank loan or even booking a train ticket. What do you think? It seems a bit crazy, doesn't it? Well, they're pilot schemes at the moment, but the risk of them being rolled out across the country seem to be increasing each day. And that's scary. With the Chinese government's use of these technologies, the Chinese dictatorship could always know where an opponent, or simply a suspected one, might be. They could also know very precisely which people they have met with and what places they frequent. I guess you can get an idea of what this might mean in terms of individual freedoms. Overall, it's not looking good. Of course, if this seems like something incredible that could only happen in countries like China, well, you may be surprised to learn that in countries that we consider free, the use of surveillance technologies for social monitoring is not as rare or as uncommon as we might originally think. Let's take a look.
Control, a universal vice?
So first of all, a question. Do you think it's justified to undermine the privacy of people in public spaces in exchange for greater security? Now, I know this is a complex issue, and the truth is that I don't think there is a clear answer to any of this. There are people who prioritise privacy and freedom above all else, and others who would say that security is much more important. However, some of the things we are seeing today, even outside China, make us wonder whether perhaps the path that has been set in some countries is not exactly the most appropriate. There are several countries considered free and democratic, such as the United States or especially the United Kingdom, which are also trying to develop Chinese-style facial detection systems. Good luck in the UK, we've all got terrible teeth. We'll see how that works out. Of course, today the limitations of technology, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on whoever is looking at it, are still very significant. For example, a test conducted by the police in South Wales in the United Kingdom with a camera detection system called Neo-Face determined that during the 55 hours in operation of the 2,900 possible matches, only 145 were real positive. That means only 145 were positive facial surveys of the right person. See what I mean about the teeth? But it's clear that this technological gap can be closed very quickly. Listen up.
London police are taking surveillance to a whole new level. London's police department said that it would begin using facial recognition to spot criminal suspects with video cameras as they walk the streets, adopting a level of surveillance that is rare outside China. The New York Times.
Yes, you did hear that correctly. To achieve this, the British capital wants to make use of more than the 627,000 surveillance cameras spread throughout the city, the largest infrastructure of this kind on the entire European continent. We're talking about 68 cameras for every 1,000 Londoners. Clearly, the result of the use of these systems will not be the same in a country like the United Kingdom as in autocratic China, but privacy seems increasingly doomed. And that forces us to ask ourselves a few questions. Is it justified to expand video surveillance in the name of security into every corner of our lives? Should we accept that governments be provided with localization data from our smartphones to eventually resolve a crime? What's more important to you, security or privacy? Is it possible to reach a happy medium, or do you think there will always be a tendency to monitor more and more and more? In an upcoming video, we'll look in detail at some such plans put in place by some of the world's most powerful governments. But at the moment, we'd love to know your opinion. We really hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like and subscribe if you did. If you hit the little bell down there, you'll hear from us whenever we put our new videos up. We put ones up every few days. Also, please consider checking out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not my dulcet tones. Also, this channel is possible because of Patreon and our patrons on that platform. Please consider joining them and supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
If you want to learn more about politics and world affairs and hear some more of my lovely voice, come check out the Reconsider podcast, where we don't do the thinking for you. Find Reconsider at www.reconsidermedia.com or on Apple or Google Play or your favorite podcatcher.